Joining us here today on NewsX World. China has condemned what it's called US ideological bias following a ruling invoking a port linked to the Panama Canal. Beijing said the decision undermines fair market principles and accused Washington of politicizing economic and infrastructure issues. The comments come amid broader strains between the United States and China over global trade security and strategic influence. Let's listen in to what the Chinese diplomat Lin Jian had to say.
维护中国企业的正当合法权益。我想强调的是，美方的有关言行再次暴露自身冷战思维和意识形态偏见。谁在寻求霸占运河？谁在以法治之名行破坏国际法之时，国际社会有目。
We are now being joined by Mark Sutherland, joining us from London, who's a geopolitical commentator. Thank you so much for joining us here on NewsX World. Why is China criticising the US as being biased over Panama's port decision, and what message is Beijing trying to send?
Good to be with you again. Well, the Panama Canal was very, very interesting because many years ago, under President Carter, who then gave up the American rights to that, there were many people that were very angry about that at that time. So there's a very interesting history, especially when you read books by John Perkins, The Economic Hitman, and I recommend people to look that up. It's very ironic to me that the CCP is accusing America in regard to this about being fair to markets, because I'm sure if we look at their policies that they are not. Also, America is very concerned about what's been going on in their backyard, as Venezuela has turned recently, where Maduro, they went in, took him out by a helicopter because they're very concerned about narco-terrorism, etc. And as Dan has just commented on in regard to Russia and where oil is sold, you know, we look at this hegemony that China wants. China wants a multi-pilot, multi-polar world, so that's why you've got BRICS. That's why Russia wants that. And you have to look at all these other links. And as I just say, finally, the Trump administration is looking at its backyard, and the trade routes in Panama Canal is extremely important in regard to the region there of South America, but it's also watching what other countries are up to. And China is up to a heck of a lot, especially under the Biden regime. You then saw thousands and thousands, if frankly millions of people going over their unsecured border in Texas, and that also involves China as well. So there's a lot playing out here, but the control of the Panama Canal, these contracts, is very, very important to America. Ellie.
And how does this dispute show the bigger picture of the US-China competition over global trade and strategic ports? Is the US supporting Panama's court decision reflect just the legal concerns, or is it also about limiting China's influence?
Ellie, I think you've just said it in the last sentence, in the last few words. It is about Chinese influence. I completely hear what Dan was saying in regard to how much trade then China is responsible for. We have to look at the Belt and Road, how influential they have got into many countries around the world, where they come and invest that money and then demand mineral resources, etc. in payment for that. We also, within the West, have to look at from 1980-82, you know, 55,000 plus factories, then manufacturing units, then left America firms over to China. You go back in history, you look at Nixon, Kissinger opening up China to the rest of the world. This has been a long time coming, especially whatever people think, whether it's conspiratorial, it's not, because it's laid out there, where people turn around and go, right, we want China to be the manufacturing hub of the whole world. And as the Trump administration has been fighting since President Trump came back in his second administration, which is to get firms back into America, get manufacturing back into America. It's all about this. Finally, it comes down to hegemony. It comes down to America fighting to continue to be number one, with China straight with hot on its tails to wanting to push America off that. And we just have to look at the CCP, what they stand for, communism, how they then run China, to look at the lack of human rights for various people over there. There's so much to discuss here, Ellie, and actually, as I say, it's about economic power and the ideology, in my humble opinion, that China then pushes and what they believe in. Ellie.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us here today on NewsX World. It's a pleasure speaking to you. Russia's Belgorod city